What is the emotional path on this? Because
it's over 9,000, my friend. It's over 9,000.
I'm just thinking like...
There is no limit.
The limit does not exist.
You are kind of a superhero. Even if the kids don't like you, you are kind of their superhero.
How much time do they wait for a family until they decide, like, we just cannot, like, that is just not a safe space for that child to go back into?
So today we have a very special guest on with us, Mitch Lutjens. He is a good friend of mine, aging back from like way back before 2010 when we were both in high school. We went to separate high schools, but we actually met through a local youth group. And amazingly enough, Mitch moved down the street from my parents, and now my parents see him way more than me, which is okay.
He's not better.
I just feel like I've been replaced. It's fine. But Mitch also married us. He was our officiant.
Yes.
At our wedding.
A very important fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's super important.
He's the reason that we have all the tax benefits that we do.
But even more amazing is that we kind of started on this journey to parenthood around the same time. I don't know. We've really kept in touch about what's going on in our lives through trying to become parents. So that's why we asked Mitch on to talk about his experience with foster care, foster to adopt, and then more recently going through surrogacy.
Welcome back to the Who's Your Daddy podcast, where we work to demystify the process of starting a family through non-traditional means. From foster to adoption to IVF and surrogacy, come along as we navigate this tricky space on our own journey to fatherhood. From parents who have navigated these processes before to the experts that help pave the way, together we hope to gain insight and answer as many questions as we can. We are your hosts and husbands, Michael and Matt, and today we're going to finally dive into the foster care system a little bit with our good, maybe even best friend, Mitch. And I do believe his last name is still Newton. But, you know, it's okay.
Up for debate.
It's okay. Some of us know him better than
Newton
others.
Or Lutjens? Well, no, it's Newton Lutjens. Newton Lutjens.
Sorry, Matt. Michael's right. I never changed it.
Yes.
But your email address is Mitchell Newton Lutjens.
Correct.
He's playing the field.
To get that, no. I intended to get that done, and I just never filed the paperwork, and here we are 8 years later.
We talked about that too, actually, and I never changed my last name and vice versa. Neither of us did. It's just,
but still, we get letters in the mail that says Michael Schuler.
Do we really?
Sometimes, yes.
Who did you tell that was my official last name?
We told everybody at the wedding.
Did you?
Yeah, it was like Mr. and Mrs. or Mr. and Mrs. Mr. and Mr. Lindsay Schuler.
Lindsay Schuler.
Yeah, something. Or wait, no, they said Schuler. We were just going by Schuler. We literally have a plaque on our wall that says Schuler on it.
I know.
Established June 2nd, 2018.
I thought about it, and then
there was a whole narrative that was discussed right before the wedding about whose name is, or what are you doing the names. And it was very clear to me that you were going to be the Schulers. And that did not manifest.
I was like, yeah, sure. And then I was like, I don't want to change my dental license. I don't want to have to change all these things that are in my name. My dad was telling me horror stories of people's last names and mix-ups and not being able to access bank accounts and like all this stuff. So I was like, you know what? Is it worth it? Probably not. Our kids can bear both of our names and we can just keep ours and it won't matter.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask. What are you going to name your future children?
Oh, wow. So let's jump into
that.
Great question. Actually, my passport expires first part of next year. So I think I'm trying to rush through and just get my name actually changed by the end of the year.
Oh, wow. So you are going to change it.
Oh, see, I'm just ahead of the curve here. Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to hyphenate. I think that our names are too long. And it means more to Jeff to have his last name than it does for me to keep mine.
That's noble and good. Michael can take notes.
So it will be Family Lutjens at some point.
Correct.
Okay. Fine. Okay, so us, your husband, who is out of the house and at work today, kind of started talking about having a family around the same time, but you guys jumped into the foster care system and we're sort of kind of feeling that situation out to see if that would work to build your family. So when did that start?
Yeah. So the whole conception of like us moving towards family building started in like the summer of 2019, I believe. And we were just going over like what are our options, and like immediately I thought surrogacy would be the path to do.
Mm,
And Jeff pointed out like there are so many children in the world who really do need a great place. And I agreed with him, and that had kind of always been a goal for me because I had kind of
totally.
not I had like a pseudo foster system life in high school. And so I wanted to also kind of create that safe place for a child at some point. Um, and so we had that conversation and decided that we would give fostering a go. And I'm glad that we started when we did, because we were on vacation in lovely South Dakota.
That's another point to bring up. I mean, you married a South Dakota man, and I married a South Dakota man, but we're both from this small town in Oregon. So, like, how? How did that happen, even?
I don't think it speaks well for either like Albany or South Dakota that we would pick the other one. It's a statistical anomaly, but I'm happy it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you actually you said you were like you went through pseudo foster care in a way
Mm-hmm.
in high school. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so my family, my sophomore year, were like, we're moving, and they had my two youngest siblings. My brother and I were, the next two still living at home, and my parents just said, "We're moving in 2 days. The two younger one can come with us. You two can't. Sayonara."
How old
Um,
were you?
I was 16, 17.
Oh my God. Okay.
And so my foster family, best friend's family, the family that I spend all the holidays with and do everything with now, I basically been living there anyway, and they just said, "Okay, you're coming with us." And so I went, and I was really lucky to land where I did. And years later, when my brother and I kind of reconnected more, I learned about his story. But yeah, we kind of had a unofficial foster journey, and that's now the family that I live with and spend time with now.
Yeah. Wow. And that kind of influenced you in thinking about foster care and being able to be a home for other kids as well.
Yeah, I think that it was just amazing to see and know people who genuinely wanted to help a kid, myself at the time, without any reason for doing so, besides that they cared about me. And they didn't even have the benefit of going through the foster system. And in hindsight, they could have, and they could have at least been paid a little bit to cover me, but they did it all, out of pocket, just added a third kid.
Independently. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for them.
So then how was like getting approved, enrolled? Like what was that process like? How long does it take? Like
initiating
what
it.
They do?
And did you know anybody who was doing foster care at the time, or was it just kind of like trying to figure everything out on your own?
Knew nobody who was currently a foster parent at that time, and then came a year or two later, I realized that we did know somebody who was, in the process with us. But we started in the summer of 19. And we got home like a week later after we had that conversation. I tried to sign up, and it said like 3 months before we can even get into an orientation class.
Oh, wow.
To be a foster parent, even though they're incredibly desperate for foster parents, there just isn't. It takes a decent amount of time to train and get people through, and the interest was enough, but the amount of classes available couldn't sustain getting people through in a timely manner.
Was that due to like staffing? Like they didn't have enough staff to teach the classes to get
qualified staff and access to space to do those courses. And they really want to make you go through a background check, you go through a lot of review of yourself before you can even get into the class. So it takes a little bit of work. So I would say that for the average person, if you wanted to start it, just to get in the class, I would prepare like a 3 to 4 month window before you start the like the pre-process to start the process is about 3 to 4 months.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't think that's gotten any better, having friends and contacts in the system since COVID happened. So I think that's probably still consistent, at least in Oregon.
Is this something that differs state to state, office to office, or is it kind of across the board that you can see that it's kind of like this 3 to 4 month waiting period for foster care in order to like just get into the classes?
Yeah, I have limited experience overall, but I have had to work with the Washington system and the Texas system due to kids having relatives out of state. And I know that for Texas was 6 months just to start the process. And then their education curriculum is much longer than Oregon's was, at least in the window that I had to see. Washington was a 2-month wait. So it really it depends. I think every system, every state has their own general guidelines, their general wait list and access to educating foster families. But right now, I think that there is at least a significant delay around the country.
And what was the education like, the training going into those classes?
So they do, I think all of the DHS workers, Department of Human Services employees really come in with a great intent to educate and provide the families with tools they need to take care of children. There's 2 systems. One is a week-long or 2-week-long course where you do evenings for a couple hours each night. And then the second option is to do a 1-weekend intensive training, and that's what we opted for. And so it was like a 4-hour on Friday night and then 2 10-hour days, Saturday and Sunday for our training. And then you started in your home review process after that. And I imagine that each state also has a different setup for how they do their training. I've heard that in other states, especially on the East Coast, it could be like a 12-week course you're doing. But that would be like a 1 to 2 night a week situation.
Okay. So spread out over time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you learning in those classes? Just like, is it like parenting advice, or is it more like, this is how the system works and like, this is what to expect? Like, what are the classes teaching you, I guess, more about like how to care for children or like how to navigate the system? Or is it sort of equal on both?
It's definitely both. I would have thought that they were going to be educating us a little bit more on how to be parents because we had not yet had children at this point. It was definitely more geared to documenting and supporting a child who's in the system. And
documenting.
Because everything has to be documented: medications, appointments, family visitations. All that needs some kind of a record, and then they teach you how to advocate for the child. What I would say in terms of limited parenting advice they give you is that they really focused on trauma-informed care for children, because any child that's in the system has likely experienced some form of trauma to different levels, and they want you to be prepared to identify what those are, how to flush out conversation with them, how to care for them, and just be a supportive person that they are now that they now have to live with. That was kind of the primary parenting focus they gave us, and a lot of it was, this is what you should expect with court dates. What you should do to build relationship with the families, to build life skills for the children. It was very detailed, but you kind of have a fire hose going on you for 3 days, and not everything sticks. Let's say that.
Just an insane amount of information.
Well, and are you responsible for that documentation, or is it a social worker, or do they call them caseworkers or social workers?
They're both, and not every caseworker is a social worker, but you definitely work with social workers. Okay. And the documentation, there are elements that we are personally responsible for, and we turn those over to DHS. But they are ultimately responsible for making sure that all these things are completed. So they have an enormous workload, because more often than not, there's one caseworker, and this is at least my county, and our conversations with our workers, they're probably supporting anywhere from 25 to 40 children on their caseload.
Oh, wow.
That's a
And
lot.
That's a lot of kids.
Because they have like multiple things that they have to have documented every week, right?
Every week.
Every day almost, if they're on medication.
And that's
medication, visits, doctor visit, court hearings, just their internal work processes that you have, being an employee anywhere. It's a lot. And their burnout is incredibly high for caseworkers.
I mean, it's understandable that it can be kind of like short-staffed in a way if there's a high level of burnout and there's so much work put on to each individual person.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of nursing in a way.
Oh, yeah.
But instead of having 40-something kids that we're responsible for, it's like, 4 patients, 5 patients at a time. But it's still a lot when you're trying to keep someone alive.
Yeah.
I've seen caseworkers who are less invested in the role, and I've seen ones that are just like, this is their live and breathe purpose in life. But I get why at least during the first part of COVID, there was a mass exodus of workers. And then so at least Oregon did a huge hiring drive to get more workers because they were just so desperate for staff. But each one of those staff have to go through 3 to 6 months of training.
Oh, wow.
So it takes a while to get them up and running. And I definitely know, I assume rules were bent to make that happen. Because you can't leave a child in the system without having someone assigned to them. Someone should be checking up on them. And we can get into when they don't do that, but it does happen. But the ultimate goal is to prevent that. But Jeff and I, we went through the training, and that was 3 days, and then it was about 2 months of our home review to make sure our home study was completed.
2 months.
It was about well, they said it takes 3 months. So we finished our courses the middle of November of 19, and we got our first placements January of 2020.
Okay.
And that's because they were desperate for families. And we were not technically an open house at that point. And actually, we were not officially opened home until June of 2020.
That's when your house was officially approved to be
correct.
Open.
And by then we had 4 children.
Wow.
Was that 4 placements or 2? Your first placement was
3 kids.
3 kids.
Yeah, there was 2 separate placement events, but 4 kids across that. We started out with 4, 5, and 6-year-old first part of January of 2020, and it was a lot.
Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, so I was thinking of like, okay, because that came on earlier than you were expecting with this whole home.
What was your
kind of approval process? And they just came back and said, okay, we're desperate for placements. Your home's not approved yet, but we have 3 kids. Can you take them now?
That's basically what the conversation was like.
What was your leeway of time that they were like, they're ready in 24 hours, 48 hours, 20 minutes, 20 minutes?
I think we had like a 2-hour kind of like
2
hours.
No, so it was, give me a call in 15 minutes of what you guys think. I talked to Jeff, and we decided, yes, we'll go for it. But we had like 2 hours before they were actually in our home that afternoon.
So you at least had a little time to clean and get ready.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
a little time to prepare to like more than double the amount of people that live in your house.
How old were the kids again?
4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6. 3 of them.
Yep. And they were wonderful kids. We talk about them all the time because of how much we, miss them, and how much we wonder where they are in life, because you don't always keep in contact with children after they leave your home.
Sure.
And we flipped our house pretty quickly in those couple of hours.
Did you have beds? Like, did you have 3 just like extra beds? Just
we
like,
did not.
did you have like one because you were like, maybe we'll get one kid
We had
and
extra
we're ready?
beds. We had 2 queen beds in our two guest rooms, and the 2 younger boys, the 4 and 5-year-old, were at that point sleeping in kind of single beds, but they had always kind of stayed together. So they were much better to be in that queen bed by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then our 3rd guest room, our girl who was 6 was able to stay in that one by herself. And that first night that they came, they had, one, plastic grocery bag of clothing apiece and some toys. And we, DHS provided us with $300 of Walmart gift cards. And we went to Walmart, and I think we spent probably around $700 or $800 for them.
Oh my God.
Getting clothing and food and toys. And we got home, and bath started, and bedtime started, and we ran with it.
Wow.
Jeez.
How long did you have the
3
kids?
They were with us for 4 weeks, and that, I can tell you, we cried almost every other day. We'd go. It was so stressful. Like, everything about your life changes. These are kids who have trauma, so they express trauma behavior, which is nothing wrong with that. It's not, they can't help it. It's just a response that their brain,
Can you tell me more about what kind of behaviors would you experience with trauma behavior? What is that like?
Yeah. So for one of our kids, he had bathroom trauma. So he could only take a bath and not a shower. And he couldn't handle like water being poured down his head to like rinse off soap. And we didn't know that until, we tried doing a shower. He'd always said bath time, and we kind of just ran with it. But there's one time where I had seen his hair wasn't really getting cleaned very well. So I went in there and was washing his head, and, pick up a cup of water, run it down their head, and it was meltdown. The kid was no longer there. It was just screams. And his eyes were open, but he was no longer responsive. And those would last for about anywhere from 15 to 40 minutes. Yeah. Where he would just be in panic mode. And
did they not tell you that like before? Like,
they don't know.
They don't know that, I guess. Oh my gosh.
Most of
because it's kind of like, they go from a traumatic place or traumatic experience to now they're getting picked up for foster care. Or it's that fast, isn't it? There's no debrief or holding period of they're figuring stuff out with the kids. It's just like from one place to the next.
Yeah. These kids, the 2 older ones had been in the foster system briefly, but with a relative. So they had some familiarity in that situation. When they came to us, DHS hadn't really been involved in their lives very much directly. So they don't really have information to pass on. And that's pretty common. Even with kids that are in the system for many years, the available information gets lost about behaviors for the child. And it is one of the sad realities that there's no great mechanism of maintaining and sharing that information between families.
Even like if they were placed somewhere else, like, are you responsible for like documenting like, hey, by the way, this kid has bathroom trauma, for like whenever they go to somebody else? Like, do you document that so that hopefully there's some sort of, I don't know, helpful record for somebody who's next? Or
DHS or your human services would always want to know that information, and their goal is to capture it. I don't know all the methods that they utilize, but anytime we had a kid that would leave us, I would take kind of the afternoon off that we knew that they were scheduled to depart. And the couple days prior, I would build a support plan for them, a little pamphlet about meals they like, food they don't, their schedule we got used to, upcoming doctor's appointments, medications, what their trauma triggers were and responses. And I'd let them pick out, like, if I didn't know already, I'd let them pick like a picture that they liked, and then we'd put their name on it and print it, and we'd spiral bound it and sent it with them. And many times that just went back to their families. But many of these families don't have that skills, and there's potentially a reason why DHS is involved in their lives. So I would like to hope that the families took that time to review it, to learn a little bit more about how to safely support their own children or family members. Those 3 kids ended up moving to another foster family who, amazingly was a substitute teacher at their school.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And they were on a farm, and they had grandparents. Both sets of grandparents lived on either side of the main family's home. It was like a fantastic transitional opportunity, because Jeff and I unfortunately realized that we just couldn't support this family permanently, this group permanently. And so we worked on a transition plan with DHS, and I went and interviewed 3 separate families, because I said we wouldn't let them leave our home until I felt like this next family knew what they were getting into and had the skills and support network to take care of them.
Oh, that's interesting. So you sort of ran point on that. Where they went?
So that's atypical. That's not a normal thing.
Okay.
But I
control freak status.
It's because I care about
Michael.
the kids.
No. It's good. It's good. I would way rather you do some due diligence and like care, right? And want to have some control over this process.
The workers had these names, and I said, let me have a phone call with them, and we can see what works, because I want them to be informed. And I could always if I get a phone call, I could get into their house, and that would be my way of knowing if I think this person is capable. And I never actually got a caseworker that didn't like me doing that, because they want it to be successful as well. And I am a control freak, but that's only because I care about those kids.
Yes.
So you made the decision that it wasn't going to work long term to be the parents to these 3 kids. I was wondering kind of like what was the time commitment, or what was the change in lifestyle and everything from going from 0 kids to 3 kids in foster care now at your home? Like, how did you guys work?
What were things you liked to do that you were no longer able to
No, not that. Like, how did you, like, were you still going to work, and how?
Yeah. It was very hard being 2 full-time employed adults. So within a couple days, I found daycare for the youngest who wasn't in school full-time. I was able to get FEMLA through work, so intermittent child leave. So when the kids needed me, whether they were sick or doctors or court, I could leave work and go support them. The 2 older ones were in school full-time, essentially. And then I had arranged after-school care through a local program that the schools bus them to, and they got to hang out with other kids and do their homework.
Oh,
and
that's
then
great. Okay.
I'd pick them up about 5:00. We'd come home, pick up the youngest who is in daycare, who the daycare facility was ran by my brother-in-law's mom. So I also had an inside view of how he was doing, and I felt really comfortable, with her being there. And then, we went from going out to restaurants and bars, 3 or 4 nights a week, to not going out anywhere,
not seeing
at all.
Anyone.
Yeah.
But we did make it a goal as like a little family to do adventures every weekend. So we went to the zoo, we went to the aquarium, we went hiking. It was a library. Many of these kids had never seen things like that. So I wanted to create good memories for them while they were with us.
Yeah.
And
bribery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bribery.
Yeah. Of course.
That's awesome.
So the daycare and the after school programs and everything, is that something that you were kind of like solo? I have to figure this out. We have to find somewhere for these kids to be after school, etc. Or did the foster system kind of do training or have recommendations for you of who you can call to figure this out?
They were starting to find and build me options. However, again, they're incredibly busy, and their timeline was like a week, and my timeline was 24 hours, 48 hours. So I just ran with it, and I told them, this is how much it's costing. I need you to chip in something. And they said no, and I said, you try again. And they found money. If you push, they can find money.
Okay,
so I got
interesting.
I found some support. It did not cover everything at all, but it helped make those programs more attainable for us as a home.
Gotcha.
Yeah, definitely. As a foster parent, you learn pretty quickly that everything's driven by you as the advocate for the child, and you have to be present in every aspect of their life, because more often than not, they haven't had anybody being an advocate for them previously.
And I think that might be something that doesn't cross people's minds as much as like, well, I'm offering my home to this, in the system, and we did all the training, we're doing all these things well. I think maybe some people would assume that like, okay, the people that are coordinating everything, I'm not going to have to like fight against them to like advocate for this child. You know what I mean? It's like, one, you have the home. Two, you're like feeding them, housing them, like doing the laundry, doing all of the things, being the parent. But then the fact that you also then have to tell like other people like, no, I need this help. These kids need these this kind of help. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
Also, it's not the most straightforward system. It sounds like it can differ from who you're dealing with in the office or what office you're dealing with. It can differ from city to city, state to state.
You were mentioning, I think before we started recording, something about like each judge can be different. Each case is different. I don't know if you can like dive into your experience with that at all.
Yes, at least in Oregon, the system, and I actually work for human services in a different capacity than foster care. So I have like an inside window.
This is why you're the expert.
We try and do person-centered care. And so every case needs to be evaluated from their standpoint. What's in best interest for the circumstances of the child? Or, it can be adult at times. But we try and tailor as much as possible within the laws that are around us. And you'll find that even county, from Portland to Salem, they would operate differently based on their budgets and based on the available resources. And then when you get to court, rules can be bent if it's in the best interest of the individual in care. But then you also will have that aspect of a judge who has their own personal bias that may not want to separate a child from a family. And the goal should never be to separate a child from their family. You want to provide resources while a child's at home to, fix the issue that just brought DHS into their lives. But there are times where it's just not safe. And so I'm aware of one judge locally who it's incredibly seldom that they approve a removal, because a judge has to ultimately okay the period of foster care. DHS intervenes immediately, and then they get a judge to back up with the reasoning they provide. And so there's this one judge who will leave kids in situations that are precarious at times, and that's
safe.
Yeah, for how you and I would see a normal life, they would say, it's still better than removing him and creating that trauma. And there is, some logic behind that, but I think that their threshold's probably not an accurate way of life. And that same person also doesn't often okay the termination of parental rights for children so they can move on to an adoption period, because that is, when a child's been in the system for an extended period of time and it's decided that the family or relative cannot take guardianship of the child again, they will seek some alternative guardianship, whether that's just guardianship, adoption, there's a third term, but where the parent no longer is the legal guardian of the child, and then a foster resource is then awarded parental rights, essentially. And there's a judge that I know who just doesn't let that happen. But then there are others who are probably too quick to trigger as well. And we see those are kind of the horror stories across the country about why people can have a bad view of the foster system. One of the reasons.
And that's like kids getting taken from their home in a sense of like the situation wasn't that bad, or it
misunderstanding.
It's a misunderstanding, and then the kids taken away from the home and placed into the foster care system, which can be traumatic for all parties involved.
Yeah, I think there's currently a pretty famous court case happening right now where a newborn infant was removed from their family's care because they used a midwife who didn't immediately identify, and I'm paraphrasing, signs of jaundice for the infant. And when they took the kid to the hospital, the family was reluctant to engage in direct care because they wanted more information. And the hospital staff alerted DHS, who suspended parental rights. And now this kid, who's under 2 weeks old, is in the system. And the really sad thing about that, an infant, the really sad thing about that is that, the family was operating under the best information that they have. They're operating within good intent. And they were hesitant, I think, as every parent should be, when you're looking at medical options for a child. Somebody jumped the gun, and now a court case can be easily 3 months of that infant's life away from their mother. That's an incredibly traumatic thing for the family, everyone involved. So those are kind of the quick trigger fears that people have, unfortunately, because there's a reality to it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
there's definitely a middle ground.
All these systems are ran by, we're all human, and we all have different biases, and we all have different like levels of what we think is right or just. And so that they're never going to be perfect, right? Like obviously the goal would be to make them as perfect as possible, but that's probably not possible. So, we just kind of have to operate under the best that we can.
I mean, I do find it interesting that it sounds like the judge holds a lot of the power here. And of course, it's a legal circumstance, so the judge would. But I don't know, judges don't have the...
They have a lot of training and like child development, and like family
child
dynamics,
development, psychology.
Trauma. The goal is that the judge operates with input from all the vested parties. So from DHS, from the family's attorney, and that could be different for mom and dad if they're separated or not. There are things called court-appointed special advocates, and those are kind of like a resource that is outside of DHS and the attorneys, who evaluates all information and makes a recommendation based on what they think is in the best interest of the child. There can be a tribal, like a local tribe that has a say in it if the child's a part of an ICWA case. There's so many vested parties, and you're hoping that the judge takes all of that information into account, and not always will they, but they kind of ultimately have that heavy-handed power that no one can oppose easily without doing an appeal.
Which takes time.
Yeah.
Months. Yeah.
So I feel like obviously you working for the state in some sector of DHS, correct?
Yeah.
And then having gone through the foster care system, say that everything works out perfectly in the sense of like, you're able to take in a child because of a dangerous situation. That situation never gets better. DHS and the judge recognize that. You are able to, maintain rights of parentage, throughout the process. And then that child maybe comes up for adoption, and maybe that was your hope the whole time, is to, eventually maybe find a child who was never going to be placed back with their family. What like would an ideal timeline almost look like for that? As far if like everything was like, if there were no hiccups, right? Which never happens, but like how much time do they wait for a family, until they decide like we just cannot, like that is just not a safe space for that child to go back into.
Yeah, how's that determination made?
We need to look for alternative options, and we need to put this child up for adoption. Do you know what that timeline would look like?
It definitely varies state to state. My understanding of Oregon, and to be clear, I am just speaking as someone who's worked in the system or like as a foster resource parent. I'm not representing the state in this conversation.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Good clarification.
The ultimate goal is always reunification with the primary guardian, whether that be an aunt, uncle, mom, dad. If that cannot be met, there are status updates that should be occurring every 90 days before a judge in court, how the case is going. So a child's removed from home. Within 30 days, there should be a court hearing. And then after that, another 60 days for that first status update. And you want to see the family be engaged in reunification efforts and what other, it could be a sobriety issue and that they're, engaging in those services. They could be temporarily incarcerated and, they're serving their time and expected to exit at XY date. But so you got that 3-month checkup. And then at 6 months, there's a decent sized or supposed to be a decent review of the case, how progress is going. And hopefully the family's trending for reunification. If not, it could be terminated at that point. But more often than not, cases go for about 12 months before the state seeks what's called a change of plan. And that means that reunification is not the optimal plan or a likely plan for the child. And so if that 12-month mark is met and the family is not engaging properly and it's not in the best interest of the child, they could schedule what they call a change of plan. And so that's about a month away where they say, let's, put your evidence forward why we should be doing that. And the family put their evidence forward why, they should still be engaged. If they decide that they're going to pursue termination of rights, then it's kind of awarded almost within an immediate period at that point. An immediate being the case closes for the day, judge issues their order, and then you have a couple weeks to prepare. Oregon has a system where if there's a panel that comes together from anywhere from volunteers to foster parents to DHS workers, and they review all of the application of people who want to adopt this child. And that can be another relative out of state. That could be, a cousin of the child, or it could be like myself, a resource parent. And we all put our applications forward, and our caseworker, which is called a permanency worker, goes to this panel and advocates why we're the best person for it. And we don't get to be present for that. We can write letters, we can have people write letters of recommendation. And then, and sort of every vested party who put that application has that opportunity. And then they spend, I believe it's supposed to be about 3 days reviewing, but I think that they happen sort of that day and they make their decision. And
that's fast.
Then you're notified. It doesn't, but they don't have to notify you immediately either. It takes time to get their paperwork done. So they'll issue their recommendation, and DHS will then take that recommendation and say, you've essentially been awarded parental rights of this child, but we have to go to court now to solidify that. And that court date can be 3 months after, up to 3 months after. So if it's very quick and everything goes super smoothly, 13 to 14 months. If it's still going all right, and that's the plan, and everyone's kind of marching along, 18 months. If it's to award adoption, or guardianship. And then if it goes to 2 years, which can happen due to, increased appeal efforts, it can take up to 2 years, but it's, again, case dependent.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And we've kind of talked about these different processes, and obviously sometimes if you're trying to build a family, there's a financial component, right? Of like, what can I do financially? As far as fostering and maybe even then eventually adopting from foster, they help you out, right? You get some sort of like monthly, but you probably still go over that a little bit. I don't know if you have like, we sort of like went over that number, this amount. And then if you were to ultimately adopt, you know, what is the potential like financial cost on your end to make that happen?
In Oregon, we have a stage-based stipend for each child. And so like infants through, I think 5 or 6, if they have very low needs or, you know, an atypical or a typical child, I think the rate's like $671 a month.
Okay.
Which, if you're a stay-at-home parent, that could, you know, potentially cover a decent portion of what a child would cost at those ages. And then it goes up, you know, $100 or $200 as they get older, and that's for various reasons. But if they have increased needs, like if they have some kind of a developmental delay, behavioral challenges, you know, there's incremental step increases for that stipend. And that's per month. I don't think we ever spent under that amount, even when we had 3 kids coming in and partial daycare expenses, you know, daycare reimbursements. We definitely overspent just when we had our infant, we were spending just for daycare alone, probably about $1,500 a month on them. And they were reimbursing, I think, a total of $900 and some change with everything that they could do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's still costing about $500 or more a month out of pocket expenses.
Well, that's just daycare. That's not diapers and formula and clothes and driving, because there's a lot of driving involved. But for us, that wasn't why we were in it. We were there to take care of children.
Correct.
But
that's super helpful to know, because I think I think maybe it's like, oh, foster, you know, is like the most affordable option. And like maybe financially I'm in a spot where I'm not ready to go through a private adoption or surrogacy. But I have a home and I have a lot of love and I want to do that. But knowing that there's a monthly, you know, expenditure that probably is going to have to come out of your bank account is, I think, going to be is helpful to know, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it was going to vary from house to house, parent to parent,
and state to state,
spending.
Obviously, right? Like who, you know, states that budget well and states that don't budget well, and
because I've also heard that there can be families in the system that are just doing foster care to make money.
Yeah,
which is bizarre to me to think about. But is that a thing that happens too?
That is a thing. It happens everywhere. I just did a quick little search. The lowest reimbursement is $350, and that's out of Missouri, a month per child. And that's by ages, so it increases depending on the age range. North Dakota, oddly enough, is the highest that I can see at $849 per child.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's interesting.
Fargo.
Oregon's not terrible, but it's not the best either. There is help out there. So, you know, if you're a stay-at-home parent, if you know one person is a stay-at-home parent, or even if you both are, if you have relative support with daycare, you know, that stipend may actually be enough to potentially care for that child. The way that we would ideally like to live, it wasn't enough, but you can absolutely make that work. And so when you do have a foster placement with you, it's really great to track all of your expenses month by month for that child, because if you're able to adopt them, at least in Oregon, we get to advocate for a stipend that follows them to the age of 18. So if I could prove that I'm spending $1,500 a month on our child, I can take that to the finalization process, and you know, they're going to make me an offer of what they can do. And once it leaves their hands, the case is closed. they want to argue for the least amount of money as possible for a couple reasons. They want to make sure that you're not just taking this kid because they come with a check, but two, they need that as much money as possible to stay in the direct system of kids that are, receiving new care.
Okay.
So, but the rule really is, so for an infant, I think it's 670 something, 690 something. You probably will not get more than what that stipend is. It's that stipend or lower.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a very helpful amount of money per month that you don't have to pay taxes on. Also another great benefit, but it doesn't include like daycare costs. So I have to argue up until that stipend amount, and they, it could be, if the stipend 690, at most I can get 689. That's kind of the general rule. And that follows them, until they're 18, at least in Oregon. In my experience, I'm sure there are outlier cases. But then many of these children are then entitled to grants and, scholarships as they go to secondary education. There's a lot of continued funding and resources available for them to make sure that they see success, because even with a successful adoption, the graduation rate and secondary education rate for children who have lived part of their lives in the system is not a fantastic number. And we would love to see that come up. So any support available is also great. But the actual adoption process, if you're doing foster to adopt, in Oregon at least, does not cost the family anything.
Okay.
Wow.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. So
I had heard like ballpark, you can expect anything from like 5 to 10,000. I think it's mostly just legal fees, right? That's what you would be paying for. But then but in Oregon, they cover those. They cover those legal fees, right?
Yeah, there of course are random expenses that may come up, or say you're not getting the support you need, you could get your own lawyer to also step in, and they don't have a lot of power in this system, but they could be advocating, so that could be some of the cost. You might have to pay a court fee for some reason if like something messed up, but it really should be 500 or under is like the generally quoted bit of information. But the goal is always zero expense for a family adopting out of the foster system in Oregon.
Off of that, so what is the emotional kind of path on this? Because
it's over 9,000, my friend. It's over 9,000.
I'm just thinking like
there is no limit.
The limit does not exist.
The first round of foster care was 3 kids, and you were already talking about like you guys were crying just like every other day, just chaos.
Did you ever stop crying?
But then like I'm thinking about
it's still happening, so no.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm thinking about like pursuing these avenues towards adoption and going through the system, and like that's the goal, is to not only take care of these children, but to hopefully one day be able to adopt. And entering into it like that and seeing, I don't know, pursuing the system, going to these court dates, etc. What is that like when you're taking care of a child day in and day out, working towards adoption, and then possibly not being able to adopt and seeing that child go back and forth? And I don't know.
Yeah, we have had 10 placements total since 2020. So we're 3 years, which is, depends on who you talk to. That's high or low. Each family, what they want to take on is different, but there's not a child that I don't wonder about still. They kind of occupy some level of thought space for me daily. I can say that like, any emotional hardship has always been rewarded tenfold when you see like the joy that these kids get to have with you. So there is like, as long as your heart's beating in there and is alive, you do get some reward to me that made it worth it. But there are very hard days. My hardest, I was in the fetal position on my kitchen floor sobbing on the phone.
No.
But then like the joy of like bringing home a newborn and raising them day over day was incalculable. So you're going to get, no matter how amazing your process is going to be, there's going to be frustrating, hard times. But if you have a good way to decompress and manage your stress, it's a completely attainable process for almost anybody. I wouldn't let that fear of the hard times scare you away from trying to support children.
What kind of advice would you give to others that are thinking about going into foster care, of how to manage their emotions and to approach the system with grace and patience?
You are the advocate for the children. And they may have never had that ever. So regardless of how hard it is on you, it's way harder on them. So remind yourself that like you are kind of a superhero. Even if the kids don't like you, you are kind of their superhero. And that always kind of got me through when I was having hard times, because I could sideline my own feelings knowing that I was doing the right thing for the kid. My husband and I, we had like a tag in, tag out policy. Like if we saw either one of us struggling, we'd be like, "Okay, you need to step away. I got this." Or, we'd come to each other and say, "I need, tomorrow night off to just go hang out with XYZ friends." And for us, it always worked. We could always do that. And the other person could handle that time with the kids. And I think if you're doing this with a partner, have a real conversation about, what are your limits and what you think you'll need help with, and create time for each other and create time for yourself to just set it aside. Because as much as you want to get done, anybody who has a kid knows that you can't make them change very quickly.
Right.
You can't educate them quickly, but there's also things in the system that if the appointment's 2 weeks away and that's when a decision is being made, it's still going to be 2 weeks away, whether you're thinking about it every moment or not. You just have to let go. There's very little that's actually in your control, but what you do have in your control, that's where you get to be a superhero.
Yeah, and that's actually taking care of the kids, doing what you're meant to with foster care.
Are there some like limitations? I know obviously you can't post photos of any kids that have been placed with you. I'm assuming there are limits of like you can't just drop them off at somebody's house that DHS hasn't approved. Is that true? So like
yes and no. So
okay.
It's again state by state. But Oregon, at least when we were having discussions about posting children online, said they don't actually want you to like put a sticker over their face. They want that kid to feel like they're totally integrated in your life. You may be given reasons why you shouldn't share pictures if there's a safety concern for that, a relative or family member coming to find that kid. That could be a reason why, and they'll identify those members as it approaches. But in general, they do kind of want you to treat them like any other kid in your home. And that could mean, posting their picture online. I've always been hesitant about it because they have a right to privacy, and ultimately they're not my child.
Right.
So I want to respect their potential family's beliefs. And then when it comes to just dropping a kid off, you can have what's considered a babysitter, like an intermittent babysitting. Like, Matt's parents live down the street from me, and actually, true story, I needed daycare one day, and I called up his mom, and she was ready, and turns out I didn't need her to do it. But that wasn't a big deal, like a one-off, not an issue. If I have a continual babysitter, they'll need to sort of be cleared by a background check. And we've done that too. We had our nannies who came to our house every day get cleared for background. If the kid wants to go stay overnight somewhere, if it's scheduled, if there isn't an emergency where they have to do it, that place they're going to stay has to have a cleared background check. So generally, you want to get things approved before they leave your home. But if it's a one-off instance, or they're just going to a friend's house to hang out, as long as it's not a frequent place, you don't have to have everyone cleared. by the FBI.
That makes sense. Yeah. So where does that leave you now with foster care, foster to adopt? Where in the system are you? And
Yeah,
because you've had 10 placements in
and
3
some
years,
of those
4
have,
years.
yeah, some of those have been, our shortest was 8 hours. So
Oh, wow.
like, so 9.25. And that's a crazy story in itself. And then there are ones that have been with us for, on and off for 2 years. Now, we ultimately we're going into it with the idea of adopting a child through the system. And that didn't come to fruition for us. And that's okay, because these kids are where they should be right now. We are working on surrogacy, and we also started that process in the winter of 2020.
Okay.
No, 2021. Yeah.
2021.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Okay. Same as
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like December, and we had our first meeting with our potential agency, and we've just been working on it since then. And it's, as you guys know, you're kind of beholden to everyone's schedules with this process.
Exactly. Is there something that shied you away from private adoption? Was there also like a bit of unpredictability in potentially pursuing that? And is there, the decision of like, let's just do surrogacy because it's like, there's something that we can sort of plan, or was there more to that decision?
Some of the reasons why we're not pursuing fostering right now are the reasons I was afraid to do private adoption. And it's, the idea of supporting, identifying a parent who's like anticipating to surrender their child at birth. You adopt it, and then at the last minute they kind of realize it's not the right choice for them, and then it ends, and you kind of have all your hopes and dreams kind of dashed in that moment. And that's kind of why we were like, I said like, I can't do that at the time we started fostering.
Emotionally, you had spent all of the like unpredictable emotions, I mean, on the foster system.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not getting any younger.
But I didn't think fostering would have done that. That was my own naivete. I thought we were going to get around it, and turns out,
I mean, I didn't think so either. I always I think about that emotion attached to private adoption with the situation you just explained, but I did not consider that emotion with foster to adopt.
Yeah, that's where I was operating. I just didn't want it to start happening and then it get pulled away, and then our little dreams are broken for the time being. So we kind of just said it wasn't the right choice, especially when you consider the potential cost with it as well. Like, we live a comfortable life, but how many potential failures can we afford emotionally and monetarily? And then with agencies, if you pay a $25,000 or $50,000 fee to work with them, and that's only gives you 2 years of work or 3 years of their work, and you don't get a placement, and then they say, "Okay, we need more money." That scared me. That scared us.
See, I don't even know if we went down the adoption road that far to know that there's a 2-year time limit.
No, we didn't.
On your money.
We didn't know that.
There are many that have a contract that you sign, and this is our efforts good for this period of time. Or if it's we start like in that period of time, and we start a adoption for you, and that ends, that could also end your contract. And then that's $25,000, $50,000 that failed, and we need it again to continue this process with you.
So it could
there
just
are
be
some
like for
like
an
that.
individual, like, oh, we're gonna just try this one case, and if it doesn't work out, then we're gonna need another fee.
And that was conversations that I had with agencies. Not every agency does that. That's not
they all
gonna be
operate differently,
experience.
right? Yeah,
but we encountered that, and that scared us from running that road.
Just
and so we're in surrogacy, which is more expensive, but there's a little more certainty, hopefully, at the end.
It's like, yeah, and I think that's part of. I mean, none of these processes are predictable. But the one that you can have the most control over seems to be surrogacy, and you pay a premium for that. But
Kind of.
you get embryos.
Kind of control.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You kind of control. You can control so much.
We talked about this the other day, and I said it was delayed unpredictability.
Delayed unpredictability. Yeah. You pay this fee, you pay that fee, you make your embryos, and assuming that you have, at least
you do everything you can
embryos,
to set yourself up for success, and then you cross your fingers and
that the biology takes over.
Yep, and hope that nature goes the way you want it to.
Yeah. Oh,
that's surrogacy.
Yeah. And it comes at a premium, but like it's one of those things. It's like, okay, do I invest a lot financially, or do I invest like an insane amount emotionally? And obviously you're investing emotionally in surrogacy. That I'm not saying that there's,
but it's delayed.
It's delayed. Yeah. Or it's like, right now we've done this process for a year and a half. We haven't had
the heartbreak, the
children in our arms, and
right.
then them taken away. It's a different type of
you have to have the heart
currency
for it in the moment, and be in full knowledge and willing to take care of a child for a long period of time, hope to have that child in your life, and then for that child to be taken back away and put back in possibly a difficult situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, yeah, you really are a hero for stepping into that position.
Yeah.
Like, you guys you did some pretty insane things to be able to take care of kids that shouldn't have been your responsibility to begin with. So
do you think at some point in the future you'll reopen your house to foster, like maybe once there's a few kids? That's something that we've thought about. Is I think just hearing, I mean, because we were lucky enough to know and follow you guys through your foster story, which played a little bit of a part in how we made our decision, right? And we're like kind of watching people go through these processes, and we're like, gosh, I don't know if we're cut out for that at this time in our life, but in the future, I
definitely.
think, I told the story of my sister having 3 of her own kids, and then being like, look, I am financially set up, and I have a giant heart for children. They also had some like testing done where it wasn't actually safe for them to have any more kids of their own, and I think that maybe sort of factored into it. But they were like, we want to open our home, and then they ended up adopting from foster. And I for some reason, to me, that felt more attainable, of like, okay, I've raised a child, I have a home set up, I know what daycare is like, I know what taking them to school is like. And so then if I were to add another child into it, obviously I'm dealing with a lot of other things with that, but maybe I'm set up a little bit better. Is that something that you've thought about in the future?
I really believe we will come back to fostering. I think that ultimately it's something that I want to do in my lifetime. And that may just be being a temporary placement for children. But I, like you, want to have some permanency and stability, like with my family unit, before I gamble on that unpredictability again.
Yeah.
I see us, or we see us having 2 children, but we both agree that we want to foster again, and there's room for us to then pursue a 3rd child. And if that's to be the thing, I actually want to, this next time we do it, pursue finding a teenager or kid that's a little bit older, for various reasons. But I think that would be like closing the loop on my story, is bringing a older kid into some safe place, because I personally, having gone through it, there were very, very few options available to myself, and I know that it's not much different nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any tidbits, anything that we haven't covered that you're like, oh my gosh, how did you guys not touch on this? I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, I definitely want to learn a lot more about foster care.
And I doubt this is the last time we have you on.
Yeah. Like, please teach me.
I think we generally covered a lot of it. I'm sure it'll be something as soon as we stop talking that it pops to mind, but there's a lot of joy that comes from the experience. And even with that, it is kind of hard to, being somebody who's going now through surrogacy and meeting someone new, and we say we're pursuing surrogacy, and one of their first comments is, well, have you tried adopting?
You're like, do you want me to tell you?
Hold the beer.
Hold my drink, please.
Those people are funny, because often what I found are the people who say that first are also the same people that say, you're trying to steal someone's child. So it's a pick a struggle.
Oh yeah.
People have commentary, I guess. And you kind of have to let it roll off your back, because you're making the decision that's right for you.
Right.
And I encourage everyone to explore their options, especially foster care. There's a great need. I think more of us are capable of supporting the network than we give ourselves credit for. But you just got to push a little bit and figure out what you can do. And that might only be doing foster one child, but if you can help out one kid, great.
And I think that's super important and like such a valuable perspective. And that's why we wanted to talk to you, is like, I think a lot of times people hear, oh my gosh, it's the foster system. It's crazy. There's so many kids. There's so much trauma. There's so much this, there's so much that. But hearing your experience with 10 placements and hearing like, but it's so rewarding.
And if you can just help out one kid.
Yeah. That's like so worth it. And it's so encouraging. And I think that
you can set your limits. You can set your boundaries and say, this is what I can do.
And I became real good at that.
Yeah. And there's there are some systems built in where, if you need to travel, and, there are families that do like weekend respite. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so there are, probably not enough things to be put enough support in the system. There always could be more.
But there's ways.
But there are definitely supports built in to try and make it manageable. Well,
respite providers are like every foster parent's dream to have that access.
Yeah.
And just one little point, can we mention another social media person about their journey? Just a brief little.
Oh, 100%.
Oh my gosh, of course. You can do whatever you want.
Well, when we started this journey, PJ and Thomas were starting there, or like in the middle of their fostering journey. And they definitely opened a window into like, oh, it's totally possible for two dads, for me at that point, to like pursue that avenue. And seeing their great success and happy story was a fuel, and still is a fuel for me to pursue that, because there is joy that comes from it for people. So I definitely applaud them, and
I'm so thankful for their story online with foster care.
They are on our TBD guest list.
Yeah, we might actually be.
So we are.
Send them this link, and maybe it'll.
Yes, of
they
course.
can hear their impact.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they had a triple, 3 children placed with them, and then it was a success story of adoption. And I think maybe you were like, maybe I didn't want to have the experience of PJ and Thomas immediately as my first placement, having 3 kids, but I guess now I know.
To that.
Yeah, I guess now I know what it's like.
A slow burn to that point. Yeah. Anyway, at that time, it did. I think I would say it did impact our choice to go that route, because we saw success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all.
Aww.
Well, thank you so much, Mitch, for coming on and blessing us with your multitude of educational things that I had no idea.
You have a lot of knowledge packed in your brain about the foster care system. So that was wonderful to just pick at and weed out. And I've learned so much, and I've been your friend for many, many years, and the entire time you're at the foster care system. But I think you had mentioned before, it's not really something we bring up at the dinner table very often.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why it's nice to just sit down and just have a time dedicated to get all this info and just
we'll
kind of talk
definitely
about
be
your
unpacking
experience.
a lot more of this in the future, because I feel
Yes.
like, the more you know, the more you want to know.
Yeah, seriously.
So
Well,
thank you.
enjoy the rest of your day. Get back to
You
being
as
so
well.
productive at work, and hopefully maybe another movie or two.
Oh, I actually have it queued up. So yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
We'll see you later. Bye. Wow.
Amazing.
Oh my God.
I loved that.
Oh, I feel like that rocked my brain.
And that was so informative, and
I'm
that
gonna
is
need
exactly
a debrief
what
for
I
myself.
wanted to know.
Yeah. It actually changed my perspective on foster care and the foster system.
In a good way, like you think it would be more attainable than you had once thought.
I feel, I would say, empowered a little bit of just, I don't know. I didn't, it demystified it. That's what it did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
demystified it
I think it's so easy to hear a single story, right, about somebody's experience, or hear something negative about maybe the foster care system.
Yeah.
And sort of extrapolate that to the whole experience of every foster family,
Right.
And just kind of hearing like, okay, so these are the requirements. One, we need to learn, we need to go to classes, we need to have a home study, et cetera, et cetera. And then just kind of hearing like, okay, you plan a little bit financially, but overall there's a lot of support there. I think it's just nice to have kind of like a good overview of the foster system and how we could maybe enter into that someday.
I hope we can. Yeah, I want to. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think they have a need.
As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave a review.
If you have an experience in the foster system, or as a adoptee, like Mitch had kind of, that was part of his story was, he didn't have a family at some point when he was a teenager. If you have any stories like that, I mean, I don't know
more
the best
questions
avenue
around
to share
the
them,
topic of foster care, foster to adopt,
yes,
private
so that we
adoption.
can. Yeah.
We'd love to tackle those in the future. And then check us out on Instagram, TikTok, all the things.
Leave us a review, leave
5
us a comment.
stars,
We love that. As always, thank you for listening. Until next time, Daddy's out.